Welcome to Infidelity Space. If you're new here, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. It only takes a second, but it means the world to us and helps us create more stories like this one. Your support keeps us going, so thank you in advance. Now, let's dive into today's story. A tale of love, confusion, and the unexpected twists life can throw at us. I never thought I would find myself in this situation. Growing up in a small town, I always dreamed of a simple, happy life. I imagined marrying someone I loved, building a home together, and living a life filled with warmth and connection. And for a while, it seemed like that dream had come true. I married my college sweetheart, Adam, when we were both young and full of hope. We didn't have much in terms of material possessions, but we had each other, and that was enough. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the signs of what was coming. But at the time, I couldn't have imagined it. Life has a way of surprising you, of pulling the rug out from under your feet when you least expect it. And for me, that surprise came in the form of Mr. Thompson, our landlord. Adam and I had just moved into a small, charming house we were renting. It wasn't much, just a cozy little place with a garden and a small backyard, but it felt like ours. We were excited about this new chapter in our lives, about the memories we would create in this home. Mr. Thompson, the owner of the house, was an older man in his early 60s. He had a friendly face and a warm smile, and he always seemed genuinely interested in making sure we were comfortable. At first, I thought nothing of it. He was just a kind, older man who happened to be our landlord. But as time went on, things began to change. Adam's job started requiring him to travel more, and I found myself spending more and more time alone at the house. It was during these moments of solitude that I began to notice Mr. Thompson in a different light. He would stop by unannounced more often, sometimes to check on the house, other times just to chat. At first, I thought it was harmless. After all, he was our landlord, and it was his job to make sure everything was in order. But as the weeks went by, I began to feel something shift in our interactions. One afternoon, I was out in the backyard, tending to the garden. It was one of my favorite ways to pass the time, especially when Adam was away. The sun was warm, and the smell of fresh soil and blooming flowers filled the air. I was lost in my thoughts when I heard the gate creak open. I turned to see Mr. Thompson walking toward me, his usual smile on his face. "Afternoon, Sarah," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "How's the garden coming along?" I smiled back, brushing dirt off my hands. "It's doing well. I think the tomatoes are finally starting to take off." He nodded, stepping closer to inspect the plants. "You've got a real green thumb. This place hasn't looked this good in years." I laughed softly, feeling a small sense of pride. "Thanks. It's been a nice way to pass the time." We stood there for a while, talking about the garden, the weather, and eventually life in general. It was a pleasant conversation, but there was something about the way he looked at me that made me feel uneasy. His gaze lingered a little too long, his questions a little too personal. And then, out of nowhere, he asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Are you happy here, Sarah?" I blinked, unsure how to respond. "Of course," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Adam and I love this house." He nodded, but his eyes never left mine. "That's good to hear." But I meant, are you happy? Really happy? The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I think so," I stammered, suddenly feeling exposed. Mr. Thompson's expression softened, and he took a step closer. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "it's easy to forget how important it is to have someone to talk to, someone who really listens." I didn't know how to respond. His words felt like a mirror, reflecting back the loneliness I had been trying to ignore. But I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a harmless conversation. After all, he was just being kind, right? As the weeks turned into months, Mr. Thompson's visits became more frequent. He would show up unannounced, always with a reason, a leaky faucet, a loose shingle, or just to check in. But each time, the conversations grew deeper, more personal. He would compliment me on how I looked, how well I took care of the house, how thoughtful I was. At first, I thought it was just his way of being friendly, but soon it began to feel like something more. His words carried a weight I wasn't used to, a weight that made my heart race in a way I couldn't explain. One evening, Adam was away on another business trip. I was curled up on the couch with a book, trying to distract myself from the quiet emptiness of the house, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before answering. When I opened the door, there stood Mr. Thompson, his smile as warm as ever. "I was just in the neighborhood," he said casually. "Thought I'd stop by and make sure everything was all right." I forced a smile and stepped aside to let him in. It had become normal for him to stop by unannounced, so I didn't think much of it. But as we sat in the living room, the atmosphere felt different. There was a tension in the air, a quiet intensity that made my skin crawl. He sat closer to me than usual, his presence overwhelming in a way I couldn't ignore. "You know," he said after a long silence, "it's rare to meet someone like you. Someone who really listens. Someone who truly cares." His words were kind, but there was something in his tone that made my stomach twist. I laughed nervously, pulling my legs up to my chest, trying to create some distance between us. But he didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't care. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. "I just wanted you to know that you're appreciated. You're a very special person, Sarah." The way he said my name sent a chill down my spine. I felt trapped, unsure of how to respond. My mind raced, but the words wouldn't come. Before I could say anything, he stood up. "Well, I should let you get back to your evening," he said, his smile returning. "Just wanted to check in and make sure you're okay." I nodded, my throat dry, and watched as he left the house. When the door clicked shut behind him, I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. I sat there, staring at the door, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I felt a mix of emotions, confusion, guilt, and a strange sense of unease that I couldn't shake. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Mr. Thompson and me only grew. I still hadn't told Adam about the strange interactions with our landlord. Part of me feared that he wouldn't understand, or worse, that he'd get angry and upset with me. After all, I was just trying to be friendly, wasn't I? It was just small talk, nothing more, right? That's what I told myself each time Mr. Thompson showed up at the house unannounced, trying to brush off my growing unease. But the unease wasn't something I could easily ignore anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Mr. Thompson had looked at me, the way he had touched the armrest of the couch during that one visit, as if he were trying to make a connection that wasn't just neighborly or landlord-tenant related. I would catch myself replaying the moment over and over in my mind, each time the tension growing within me. One evening, after another unexpected visit from Mr. Thompson, I finally decided I had to do something. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I sat Adam down and told him everything about the visits, the conversations, the way Mr. Thompson made me feel. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I thought Adam might get angry or upset. But to my surprise, he listened. Really listened. "I'm so sorry you've been feeling this way," he said, taking my hand. "I had no idea. We'll figure this out together, okay?" His words were a balm to my frayed nerves. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Together, we decided to set clear boundaries with Mr. Thompson. We would be polite but firm, making it clear that his visits needed to be strictly professional. The next time Mr. Thompson stopped by, I was ready. I opened the door with Adam by my side, and together, we explained that while we appreciated his concern, we needed to keep our relationship strictly professional. Mr. Thompson seemed taken aback at first, but he nodded, his expression unreadable. "I understand," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to overstep. I'll respect your boundaries." As he walked away, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the situation was finally resolved, but sadness that it had come to this. Life is messy, and sometimes, even the most well-intentioned relationships can become complicated. Looking back, I realize how important it is to communicate, to set boundaries, and to prioritize the relationships that matter most. Adam and I grew stronger through the experience, and I learned that no matter how difficult a situation may seem, facing it head-on is always the best course of action. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation, Know that you're not alone. Life is full of challenges, but with honesty, communication, and a little bit of courage, we can navigate even the most complicated moments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.